1, 2, All right, so 2 courses of blues, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to practice the piece and also do a little bit of analysis as far as the themes and the variations and some devices that I'm using in the piece. Let's start out. The first 3 notes, very, very important as far as articulation is concerned. It seems like it's no big deal, but I've done master classes and clinics where I ask a whole group of people, say a whole big band, and I'll say, can you play these 3 notes, G, B, C? And some people are going, some people are slurring it. Some people are going, that's a common one. The way you want to do it is to tongue the upbeats only. So you're going to go ta, ta. And you want the 3rd note to be short and a little bit heavier in weight. Let's do it again. 1, 2. Okay, that is how you're going to want it, because you want to have those dynamics in there. If you do it without the dynamics, it doesn't have any kind of presence to it. It doesn't really grab your attention. That gives it direction, okay, and that's what you're going to need. It makes it feel like there's more to come. There's other musical things that are going to be happening. Now, one thing that you can do that's a nice exercise with just these first 3 notes, because it's such a common phrase, it's going 5, then the lower neighboring tone or the leading tone, and then the tonic, 5, 7, 8, or 5, 7, 1. Put it in the cycle, so go like this, 1, 2. Now put it in F, so that was in C, you're going to start on the C. Okay, so now you're in F, and then this is an easy exercise because the new key starts on the note where you left off. You just repeat it, right? So, 1, 2. Now we're in F. Now we're in B flat. Now we're in E flat next. We ended on a B flat. The B flat was 1, right? So it was like a B flat 7 chord. Now, the B flat is 5 of E flat. In those situations, I call that note a dual citizen note because the B flat was acting as a certain degree in one chord. Here it was acting as the root, and then we play that B flat just a moment later and it's acting as the 5th in a different chord. Okay, so that's just sort of an aside, just so you know about that. So we're all the way around. If you want to speed it up, now the rests are very important, actually, just as important as the note. So don't do a thing where you're speeding up or you think you're saving time by going where it's out of time. It has to be in time. Time is the most important thing. So you're either going to do it or you're going to go like this. Either one of those is fine, okay? Going on. Let's talk about the grouping of the notes now. The notes do not appear on the page according to the proper groupings. You look at the page and you see the note heads, the 8th notes, the little stems coming down from the notes, and then you see the beam, which is that line that goes across connecting those notes. But it is deceptive because it makes you think that you look at the second full measure, the D minor. Nothing wrong with those 4 notes, but they're not really a group. Here's the group. There's the 4-note group. E, C, A, D. We've arrived at beat 1. Now, this is where it starts moving forward. So in that second measure, the measure with the D minor chord, really the first note of that measure to me is the and of 1. It's the E. and it's because it's going to be leading toward this destination of the downbeat of 3. So the two destinations are the downbeat of 1 and the downbeat of 3. So it starts moving forward at the and of 1. So 3, 4, 1. Ba-da-da-ba. You've arrived. Then ba-da-da-ba. Okay, so I'm going to put some fermatas so you can hear the note groupings the way that I'm hearing them. Okay. Now at the very end of the phrase, there is an exception to that rule of 3 pickups to the destination, because sometimes at the end of the phrase I will either add a note or two or subtract a note or two. I like to edit the end of the line. Okay, so that one was edited. That was 1 note short. If I wanted to have that note back in there, okay, I would probably go, I'd probably do that. The line would have been, but I didn't want it to, I wanted to have the anticipation. I didn't want it to end squarely on beat 1. So that was the desired effect. Okay, going on, you can really feel the groupings on this next one. Then, so when you play that, that's what makes it feel like it's flowing nicely. You know, you could be counting this thing correctly, right? Counting the 8th notes. A lot of people think that's all there is. Learn how to count the 8th notes. You play, you know, you can fit 8 of them in a measure. They get half a beat. And as long as you play the correct note, you're good. That's not true. The internal groupings of the note are critical. Just as I'm saying this sentence, I wouldn't say, just as I'm saying this sentence. That's not good grouping, because it makes it difficult to tell which words are supposed to go together. So, it almost feels like a jazz waltz when I do this to reveal the grouping of the notes, and I recommend doing this if you're playing a transcribed solo or something and there's a lot of 8th notes. Try it like this. You'll start hearing the player's groupings, okay? So, here's how it would really be. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next one. If I go. It's so flowing like that. It's so natural. Listen to how it sounds if I don't observe the groupings. Listen how disjunct it sounds. Then, and then, it makes no sense at all. It would be like reading a book where every word is off by 1 letter. So the first letter of each word is not attached to the correct word. It'd be something like that. So, then, it's almost like a duet. So I'm going like this. Like here's player A. And here's the answer. And then here's the response. So when you're playing, if I don't have that, listen to how stiff it's going to sound. It feels stiff. It doesn't feel flowing, even though I counted it correctly. This is a very common problem. The other thing contributing to that problem of that feeling of that it doesn't swing or it feels too stiff is a lot of times people are not tonguing the upbeats. You need to tongue the upbeat and slur to the downbeat. So, ta, 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 and ah. Ta, 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 ta. Okay. Now, I will rarely go ta-ta. I do sometimes, but I don't usually do that. So, a lot of people are playing it. Okay, so tonguing all consecutive notes. You can do it, but it's a special effect. It's sort of like typing in all capital letters on the computer. Fine, you can do it, but you got to know that you're doing that, and it should be on purpose. It can't just be you didn't realize that the caps lock was on and you're typing in all caps. So, so you can do it. It's special effect, but get this, I call it mainstream tonguing. Get this thing down where you're tonguing the upbeats only. A lot of dynamics in there, okay? If I take away the dynamics, it loses all the energy. Now, how do you get those dynamics? How do you get it to jump? Well, one thing is that you have to get the concept that the dynamics are changing very rapidly. You know, when I was a kid in school, I remember thinking dynamics was, you know, the two hairpins, right? This gradual increase in volume as you go up a scale, and then a gradual decrescendo, a crescendo and a decrescendo, right? You go up the scale and you get louder, you go down the scale, you get softer. What I find the reality is that there are massive dynamic changes from one note to the next, even in a fast-moving line, right? In order to facilitate that, you really have to have very good control of the diaphragm and these muscles that are pushing the air through the horn. You have to be able to push the air really quickly with a lot of force behind it and then back off suddenly within an eighth note. So you need to practice doing that type of thing, okay? You might want to, as an exercise, maybe practice a scale or something and play soft, loud. Anything like that. Something that's going to give, you have to get the feeling of what it's like to do that, because it is a skill that needs to be developed. It's a physical reality that you have to feel what it's like to have the resistance of the mouthpiece and the air and all that working at that speed. They're a lot faster than I thought. I mean, looking back when I was a kid and I was learning to do all this stuff, I had no idea that the dynamics were, for one, so important, and two, that they were so widely varied in such a short span of time. Okay. So I'm going to just point out, you know, I'm not going to analyze this thing to death, but I want to point out a few small things. Here's an enclosure. An enclosure is when you have a note that's the targeted note and you have a note above and below that targeted note. And this is a very common element of the bebop language. So half step above, half step below, then you hit your target. And what it does is it really nicely frames that note. It really, sort of like taking a camera and you go a little bit this way, out of focus, a little bit this way, out of focus, right in the center. There it is. Like it kind of gives you some perspective. So you can take that enclosure, okay, and put it in the cycle. Okay? So the notes I'm playing A flat, F sharp, G. And if you want to do an exercise to kind of get it going, you can do something like that. There's going to be another video strictly on enclosures and doing that, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it here, but I did want to point it out because it's in the piece. Okay, so let's continue on. Now, the pickup to letter B, did you notice that pickup to A, and then pickup to B? It's the same theme, and this has a unifying effect. I call this a reference. It's referring to a musical event that happened earlier in the piece, okay? So it makes the piece hold together really well. So what did I do? I changed a couple things. I put it up an octave, and then I added an extra note in the front end of it. A lot of connecting points here. When you look at letter B, notice that every time, just about, not all of them, but many of them, when the measure changes over, it's a half step. There's the F sharp to the F. And then the C to the B. That C to the B, the C was the 7th of D minor, the B is the 3 of G7. So that's your classic 7 to 3 voice leading. Do you ever hear people talking about that? Oh, the 7 to 3, that's what they mean. If you have the cycle, or the circle of fourths, cycle of fifths, whatever you want to call it, you got a D minor to a G7, you're on a C, that's the 7th of D minor. Drop a half step, you will resolve to the B, which is the 3rd of G7. And that's a very strong sound. So here's the next move. Now, I'm going from the A natural on the G7 chord to a B flat on the G minor, so it's another half step. So when the measure changes, and if you can connect those notes within a half step or whole step, it really makes it sound smooth. Okay, now I don't do it 100% of the time. I do have skips sometimes, but often I do it a lot. I have those connections like that quite a bit. One other thing I wanted to mention. I'm hitting the F sharp there for a couple of reasons. For one thing, I'm foreshadowing the fact that we're going toward a G minor 7 chord. Now, even though it's G minor 7, which the notes would be G, B flat, D, and F natural, listen to how it sounds. If I put the F natural, it sounds really strange. It doesn't sound right at all, right? It sounds like I'm playing a B flat major scale. It sounds like I'm out of the key. But if you go, it sounds great. It sounds like I'm in G minor, which is what the chord is. The ear, you want to hear a half step below the root. So at the bottom end of the chord, even though the chord symbol would indicate that it's a lowered seventh, play that major seventh as a pickup to the root. So if you're at the bottom of the chord, that's how I do it. I would not go hardly ever, okay? That's what I would do most of the time. With the one exception, if I was playing a modal song and I was really trying to stick strictly to the mode and the thing was not a bunch of chord changes, but say one mode for 8 bars or 16 bars, yeah, then I'll play the lowered seventh next to the root. But other than that, and even in some of those situations, it's such a strong sound that it works well. So I use both sevenths, but I use that at the bottom. Okay, so that's a little subtle detail that's not usually mentioned in a lot of books. Okay, going on. Even though the note grouping is different than this brings up an important point. This is known as a 1, 2, 3, 5 pattern. B flat, C, D, F. You want to get good at those, okay? A pattern, it's similar to a lick, I suppose, but in my mind, what differentiates it from a lick is it's shorter. It's shorter than a lick, and it's not quite as stylized as a lick. It's more utilitarian than a lick. It's a cross between this particular one is a cross between, it's like a triad with one added note, with the ninth added, right? So we had B flat, D, F. So if I add the C, we get the 1, 2, 3, 5 pattern, okay? So you want to practice the 1, 2, 3, 5 pattern in all 12 keys. Run it through the cycle at first, and then do it chromatically. There will be another video on 1, 2, 3, 5s, but I did want to point out its usage in this piece so that you can recognize it when it is in use. So there it is in the 12 keys. Practice that slowly and work that out. You're going to want to be able to do them descending as well. Not quite as common like that as going forward, but you want to have that both ways. Let's finish this piece up. I love the descending augmented triad. And Sonny Stitt, thank you, because that's where I really heard it used effectively when I was about 15 years old, 16. I was listening to some great Sonny Stitt recordings. And I noticed oftentimes on a dominant chord in the cycle, he puts a sharp 5 and the descending, and it resolves beautifully because the sharp 5 is going to drop a half step to resolve to the major ninth. Okay, so there's the resolution. On the F7, same thing that I did above, back at the second bar of B. We got, and here we got. So whether you're going, here I'm going into a major third, but I still put the major seventh below as a leading tone to the root on that F7. Okay. There's another enclosure. Remember the earlier enclosure we had? Down a step. And then, if you want to take it to another level of understanding with the enclosures, if you observe 2 before B, I'm enclosing the third of the E minor, the G, but when we get to the 21st measure, the pickup to the 21st measure, I'm enclosing the fifth of D minor. Okay, so the note being enclosed could be anything. It could be a root, it could be the third, fifth, seventh, ninth, but you should practice the enclosures sort of standalone, aside from the harmonic considerations, and then once you get adept at playing the enclosures, you can take it to the next level and start thinking about how they're being applied. Okay. And notice the piece ends. Now here's one place where I didn't use the half step below. I did use I broke the rule, right? I used the... Well, I had the F sharp before, and here I was sort of using the G bebop scale. So here there was sort of an override, right? I said, I explained how you're going to use the major seventh below the root, and here's a beautiful exception to the rule, which my ear told me. Well, when I wrote this line, notice the half step there, the 7 to 3. That's the D going to the C sharp. It's E minor to A7. And then I have a flat 9, the B flat dropping a half step to the A. Well, I wanted to sequence that, so I wanted to be able to drop a half step down to resolve, and then at the end of the piece, go the opposite direction with a half step. So, because of the line dictated to me that this was an exception to the rule, and my ear told me, put the F natural there. So it worked out. So, yes, there's a lot of rules, but there's exceptions to those rules as well, as you see here. So you want to listen to a lot of things. Like how would I have known that? I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't listened to thousands and thousands of old recordings of the masters, of Charlie Parker and Sonny Stitt and Stan Getz and Coltrane, and studied them and listened to them and played along with them. Tried to I call it decoding the language. So, just as in the English language, there are exceptions to some rules. Okay, so that's one exception there. But that was Halsted Street. I hope you enjoyed it. Play it. Try to get it off the page. If you can memorize it, this is about 25 seconds worth of music here. And so it's really good if you can try to memorize it and not have to look at the page. Play what you hear. Get the sound in your ear and then let your fingers find those sounds on the horn. That's really what you're trying to do. Okay? Have fun with it. And if you want to write an extra course or two, that would be a great idea. You know, this is 2 courses long. Put a third course on there. You know, make a video of it. I'd love to see it. All right, I'll see you soon. Thanks.